And our problem, we have to recognize this is kind of primary. You know, we're always complaining. Well, the commercials are getting getting the quota of. Well, you know, why is that? Because ever since fishery management began, it's been under the Department of Commerce. It's always been considered commerce. So the basic assumptions voiced by the spokesman for the industry in the video, those are the assumptions that govern fishery management. So one, it's for commerce. How much money can we get from the commerce of this? And two, the structure of fishery management was from the very beginning based on this concept of a separate fishery for each species. So each species was to be managed separately. So the basic assumption is that each species out there is swimming around like they're in an aquarium or something, all by itself, with all the food that it needs to eat, and the species aren't relating to each other. So we do have a lot of lip service these days to ecosystem management, but there is zero ecosystem management. There's no management which is looking at the interrelation of species or the relation of species to the rest of the environment. Now the ASMSC, Atlantic States Marine Fishery Commission, just validated last month the 2010 report. It's 326 pages. I've studied the whole thing, and they actually say in their quote, overfishing has occurred in 32 of the last 54 years, but then they also recognize that they have never actually done anything to regulate the Menhaden fishery, with one exception. This was in 2006 when there were hearings, and they got tens of thousands of letters and telegrams, and people packed the meeting and said, "You got to do something about the reduction industry, especially in the Chesapeake. You're destroying the Chesapeake." And so ASMFC got together and decided they would put a cap on the catch of Menhaden by the reduction industry in the Chesapeake. And they took the figures of the previous 5 years, the average of the previous 5 years, which was a little less than 105,000 metric tons each year. That was the average that omega protein had been taking out of the Chesapeake, but had been declining. So they said, well, okay, we'll cap it at 105,000 metric tons. So Virginia said, no, you have no authority to do that, blah, 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 blah. And there was a big fight that went on, and Virginia said, we won't accept that. Finally, they well, okay, we'll raise it to 109,000 metric tons, and if you don't reach 109,000 metric tons in a year, then you can add what you missed next year. So if you got 100,000 metric tons, then next year instead of 109,000, your cap would be 118,000 metric tons. So what they were doing, they weren't setting a cap. They were giving omega protein a license to catch as many fish as they could catch, because they had been unable to come close to 109,000 metric tons for 5 years, and it was declining. Well, guess what? The next year, the first year of the implementation of the cap, what was their catch? Was it 109,000 metric tons? No, it was 65,000 metric tons. And the next year was 56,000 metric tons. That's a crash. And that's why they're coming up here to make their main catch the schools of adult spawners that are in our waters as soon as they venture into federal waters, into the EEZ. Some very interesting things if you really study that report, because it turns out that the ships are topping off in the Chesapeake. So they're fishing up here and topping off in the Chesapeake, which means that despite their spotter planes, a number of their ships are unable to fill up here, so they're filling up as much as they could here, then going down there and getting some more out of the Chesapeake to top off. Of course, the ASMFC, as well as all the states that make up the ASMFC, we have no jurisdiction in the EEZ. All they can do is make recommendations to NOAA. And NOAA has representatives who work with ASMFC, Jim Smith and Douglas Vaughn, who are just spokesmen for the industry. They've been working with the industry all their adult lives. I interviewed one of the main people from ASMFC in preparation for today's talk, to ask, okay, you're now recognizing that there's been overfishing. That this report says that they're going to have ecosystem management. They're going to in a few years. They say it's going to take us a few years to plan ecosystem management. We know what that means. And so I raised the question. Well, what about use? What about is ASMC going to do anything distinguishing between the use for bait and the use for turning them into industrial commodities? And she was very, very emphatic and said, we will not be regulating how Menhaden products are used. Use is not on the table. So if they do have any kind of regulation or management on Menhaden for the first time, it's going to be another example of some kind of split between commercial she was acting as though the bait industry was all recreational. Of course, the bait industry is not mainly recreational; it's mainly commercial. It's mainly for bait for lobster traps and so on. I think that what we really need to focus on. I don't want to make it sound like we should ignore